Hello and welcome to my video game sound design series on Massive. In today's video, we're going to go more into some sci-fi sounds, some old school sci-fi sounds, and make some cool machine powering up noises inside of Massive. And as usual, you can always download the patch that we create in these videos in the description below. So if you want it, you can download it in the description below. Feel free to use it in whatever projects you want, professional or not. It's yours. Use it however you want. You don't need to credit me or anything like that. All right, so here we go. Let's get started. So first up, we're going to start in our oscillator section, just like we always do when creating a patch in Massive. So what we're going to start with in oscillator 1 is a wavetable known as camchord, which is over here on the far right. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about and I'm going too fast, I have 5 videos on the basics of Massive. So if you don't know how to use this software, I have videos to cover you. I've got your back. So then you can get up to speed and know how to use this amazing synthesizer. So I'm going to start with camchord over here. Oscillator 2, I'm going to go to color, which is over here on the far right, colors. And number 3, I'm going to go to one called sonic, which has a kind of nice metallic high-pitched sort of sound. So we have all 3 of these oscillators turned on, not changed any of the parameters yet, so I'm just going to play a few notes and you'll hear what we have so far. So nothing special, just kind of a weird sound, but we'll tweak it and go from there. So the first thing we're going to do is pitch all of these oscillators differently from one another. The reason for this is I don't want this to be a musical sound effect. I want this to sound kind of like it's coming from the world. It's not pitched, it's not musical. I want this to sound kind of gritty or raw or quote unquote realistic. So what I'm going to do is de-pitch or detune all 3 of these oscillators from one another. So the first thing I'm going to do is tune down oscillator 1 a little bit. So let's start with kind of something around there-ish. Let's say negative 2.88 semitones. Sure, let's start there. The second one, I'm going to pitch up a little bit. Let's start maybe in the 30s, something like that. And we're probably going to tweak this after the fact and play around with it. But these are good starting points. I know these 3 should be pitched down from one another, so that's what I'm going to do. And this third one, sonic, actually has a pretty high-pitched metallic sound, so I'm going to pitch this down pretty substantially. Let's go in the 30s. Because it does have such a shrill sound to it, I don't want it to burst anyone's eardrums or anything like that. I want this to be a subtle effect underneath everything else. So I'm pitching it down to make it so that it kind of sits better with these other 2 oscillators. So now let's take a listen. So it's sounding a little bit more machine-like already. Thanks to this low-pitched sonic, we kind of have a machine rumble underneath as well, which I really, really like. So that's actually a good chunk of our sound made right there. Now we just need to work with some envelopes and a few other parameters to get things sounding pretty cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually use this envelope 1 on all 3 of these oscillators to modulate the pitch over time. So what I'm going to do is use envelope 1 and click these 4 pointing arrows on envelope 1 and apply it to the pitch of all 3 of these oscillators. Just like that. And as you already know, if you've watched my Massive Basics series, we can play around with the amount that this envelope will act on the pitch by clicking on this 1 and dragging up and down. So what we're going to do is on all 3 of these, set this to pitch up to about plus 18-ish, let's say, semitones. So over time, dependent on the attack, decay, sustain, release, all these parameters we have here in envelope 1, these sounds will gradually go up in pitch. So you're going to hear what I mean if you're a little confused. So I'm going to click and drag these envelope 1s on each of these 3 oscillators up. And now what I'm going to do is play a note. So over time, depending on the speed of this attack knob, these 3 oscillators are going to gradually pitch up to about 17, 18-ish semitones upwards from their starting original pitch. So I'm going to just hold down a key and you'll hear what I mean. So you hear it pitch up, and then it kind of sounds like it kind of pitches down, and we're going to fix that in just a second. So this is a starting point. You can hear that we have some pitch automation kind of happening right now. And if I make this attack longer, so I make the attack a lot slower, you're going to hear that that effect takes longer to happen. So you're going to hear it pitches back down to its original pitch, which you may or may not want. And that is dependent on this knob here called level. So you can see graphically, we have in envelope 1, the pitch, in this case, going up, and then eventually going back down to its original pitch. In this case, we want the pitch to stay pitched up to where we leave it. So what I'm going to do is just turn this level knob all the way up. So now when I hold down a key, it stays pitched up to wherever it is it ends up at. So it goes up 16.5, 17.62, 17.12 semitones, and then stays there as long as we hold the key, which is what we want. Maybe you do want it to pitch back down. That's totally cool. You can play with these parameters however you want. So we already have a kind of powering on, pitch shifting sort of sound. So if I hold a note down, we already have something that kind of pitches up. So let's play with some of these knobs a little bit. I'm going to turn the intensity of this first oscillator down a little bit. Yeah, it gives kind of a cool machine sort of sound when I turn this intensity down. Cool. Okay, so that's what I'm going to play with there. I like the sound of the other two oscillators. And next up, what we're going to do is add a filter, which is a very common thing to do in this case. So I'm going to add low pass 4, which is a pretty standard low pass filter. And we're going to play around with cutoff and resonance, which are the two parameters with low pass filters. So I'm going to hold down a key and play around with some of these. So I'm going to add a little bit of cutoff there so it gets rid of a little bit of those high frequencies, but not too many. I still want this to sound like this. I want some of that high frequency material in there, but I don't want that metallic shing in there as much. Maybe you do. You can play with the cutoff knob as much as you want, but I'm going to turn it down just a hair, just so I'm getting the sound that I specifically want. So next up, what I'm going to do is go over to the the voicing parameters tab over here in the center. So voicing is where I'm at. And you may have remembered from some of my previous YouTube videos that you can use this section here called unisono to play multiple versions, multiple variations of the same sound at once. So what I'm going to do is turn this up to, let's say, 3. So what this is going to do in the unisono section, it's going to play 3 variations of the same sound on top of itself. So it's going to sound even more out of tune with one another. And the first thing I'm going to do is in this unisono spread section is I'm going to turn on pitch cutoff. Pitch cutoff. So what this is going to do is when I turn this fader up and down, it's going to take each of those unison sounds and detune them from one another, kind of make them out of tune with one another more and more so that they don't sound like they're this musical, beautiful chord, but a weird machine. So I'm going to play around with this fader and you're going to hear what difference this makes. I'm going to turn this up. Yeah, I like that more when it's turned up. Yeah, it sounds more sci-fi-y. Cool. So that's where I'm going to leave that. And of course, we can add some reverb in the master effects if we so choose. So I'm going to add just a little bit of reverb here. So we have a sci-fi power-up noise, and we can also use this as kind of a sweetener or a layer for some sort of sci-fi alarm as well if we play a note over and over. So this is a great starting point and can be a great layer or standalone sound for any sort of sci-fi power-up sound. And the cool thing is we can change how long this power-up sound takes by playing with this attack knob. So if I turn it all the way up, it's going to take a lot longer for this sound to quote unquote power up. So really, really cool. I really like working with this stuff, and working with envelopes on the pitch sections can allow us to do it. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, of course, like it, subscribe, because I make a video every single week that helps composers, sound designers, game developers get their skills up and their careers up in the game industry specifically. And also sign up for my newsletter, which is where I share all of my best stuff on how to get an actual career that pays you well in the video game industry. On top of that, please watch my talk from GDC, the Game Developers Conference in Europe, where I spoke about the sound design behind Hyper Light Drifter, which is an indie game that I helped make that released in March of this year. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.